The literature review is one of the hardest parts of doing a dissertation. And students struggle for many reasons, and one of them is that they are not too sure what they should be reviewing. And we can answer that question by trying to understand the types of literature review that there are. So in this video, I'll start by explaining the three types of literature review, and I'll also use examples to illustrate each type. I am Miguel Moital. I am the founder and chief content developer of the Dissertation Academy. And if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. The three types of literature review are the theoretical review, the integrative review, and the methodological review. So let's look at each of these individually. The theoretical research review presents and compares the different theories for explaining the phenomenon under investigation. And any research should be theoretical underpinned, and in this section of the literature review, you should review relevant theories within your area of research. When developing your theoretical review, it is very important that you go beyond the context of your research. And this is because you are interested in the theory irrespective of where it was developed. You're trying to understand the principles associated to the relevant theories, and this could have been, and most likely have been, developed outside the context of your research. For example, if you are interested in exploring previous research, let's say on brand resonance, you should review research on it independently of the context in which it was explored or applied. So if you are doing something, for example, on brand resonance in hotels, you should review the studies on brand resonance as a whole, not just in your specific context, which is hotels, or even in the wider context, which is tourism. You should go to any study that looked at brand resonance, as they could have potentially made a contribution to the theory around the topic, around the context, and if they have done it, you should include it in your theoretical review. Remember that the objective of this review is to familiarize yourself with the theory and what we know about the theory. And theory means principles, concepts, relationships. So what you're interested in these things. Let's look at a couple of examples. This first example refers to a literature review that is focusing on introducing terminology. The paper is about loyalty. The main concept of this paper is loyalty, and the authors introduced loyalty in general, as well as different types of loyalty, behavioral loyalty and attitudinal loyalty. So the focus is on one of the 6 purposes of a literature review, which is introducing terminology, relevant terminology. There are other 5 purposes, and I do cover them in the virtual tutor online resource. This second example comes from a dissertation that I supervised, and the focus is not on introducing terminology, but on reviewing theories and concepts. In this particular case, the student looked at what could lead people to reach the pinnacle of the CBB customer-based brand equity pyramid. And in this instance, the literature identified a number of conditions that would facilitate someone reaching the top of the pyramid, such as having a harmonious relationship with the brand, perceiving a brand as special, have a strong attachment to the brand, be actively concerned with the brand, be in sync with the brand, and have a willingness to engage with the brand. The integrative review is the second type of literature review, and this type summarizes past research and identifies conclusions, makes conclusions based on different studies related to the topic of research. And here, topic of research, it means the context of your research. So the objective is to understand the state of the art in your area of study, in the context of your study. One important element to bear in mind is that this is not a very broad review. So you're not going to review everything about your context. This type of review is often bound by the theoretical review undertaken. So if attitude is the area of theoretical review, if your study focuses on attitudes, then the focus of the integrity review is on how attitude theory has been integrated in your area of study. I emphasize the word integration. Integration means explored and applied, how that area of theory, which is generic and for sure has been applied in many different contexts, how that theoretical knowledge has been integrated, explored, applied, however you want to refer to it, in your area of research. This is usually a much shorter section, a much shorter part of the literature review, if anything, because the theory is quite wide. You know, usually theories have a lot of branches, there's lots to say about them, but the amount of research and the variety of areas that have been explored in your specific area is much reduced when compared to everything that has been researched. Let's look at an example that comes from a paper that I co-authored some time ago. Here in the integrity review, we start by saying that actually there are very few studies that attempt to segment the tourist market based on gastronomic experience. So we immediately say, look, we know a lot about certain things, but those things have not been applied, have not been integrated in our context, which was the gastronomic experience of tourists. There are exceptions, and we illustrate what those exceptions are. There were two at the time we published the study, and we also explain them. But what we are doing here is not reviewing the wider literature, but trying to understand what exists in our specific area of research, in this instance, the gastronomic experience of tourists. Time to move on to the last type of literature review, which is the methodological research review. In the methodological research review, we examine the different research methods that have been used to solve our research problem. And we discuss these different research methods with a view to identify the most appropriate course of action for achieving our research aim and objectives. In most cases, this review tends to be placed in the methodology chapter, because this is where you explain what you have done and why you've done it that way in your study. But sometimes, and I've done that, we offer a methodological review in the literature review, or part of the methodological review in the literature review, such as explaining, for example, the countries or the types of people that have been researched. The focus of this review is on the methodology employed by relevant previous studies so that we can learn from them. Doing the methodological research review allows us to identify possible ways of researching our topic. But also, and this is very important, it also helps us to be better equipped to reject methods that have proven to be ineffective and adopt others that perhaps have shown to be effective by previous studies. In other words, it will help you to avoid making mistakes and similar mistakes to those made by previous researchers. Let's look at two examples to see the methodological review in practice. The first one comes from one of my studies, and what we did was to review the geographical scope of studies in our area, which was sponsorship. So what geographical areas have sponsorship studies being carried out? By doing that review, we actually concluded that the vast majority of studies were done in a Western context, whether it is the US context, Scottish, and Australian. We identified that were virtually no studies on our topic, event sponsorship, in an Asian context. And there was one study, there was an exception, which was a study done in China. Actually, this was really useful because we were doing our study in India. So we could claim that our study was the first one on event sponsorship, or in sponsorship in general, carried out in an Indian context, and therefore it would contribute to a better understanding of sponsorship patterns in the Asian context, which we had proven to be very little researched. So the element that we are reviewing here, the methodological element that we are reviewing here, is the context of the research, and more specifically the geographical context of previous studies. A second example, also from a study that I co-authored, focuses on reviewing a different methodological topic. And in this instance, it's the statistical tests that previous studies employed. So we identified that some studies used ANOVA, other ones have used either stepwise or multiple regression, and that more recently, some studies had started using structural equation modeling. Again, this was important for our argument because we were actually going to use a different statistical technique called logistic regression. And by reviewing the literature review on previous statistical tests employed by similar studies, we were able to claim that we were using a technique, a method that had not been used before. If you are enjoying the video, please press the like button. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing so that we can grow the community. In order to help you understand the different types of literature review, in particular the theoretical review and the integrity review, I'm going to show you an example of a table of contents where there is a clear separation between the theoretical review and the integrity review. The dissertation was on the effectiveness of online well-being events in satisfying the need for existential authenticity, and therefore the key theoretical concept being explored was existential authenticity. Online well-being events is context. And in the literature review chapter, the student started by exploring the concept independently of the context. So she reviewed the concept of authenticity and existential authenticity. Then she addressed the existentialist perspective, because a lot of studies had been developed in the tourism literature. She specifically looked at the tourism perspective on existential authenticity. Then she reviewed what was known about attaining existential authenticity, and a final theoretical review was on the dimensions of existential authenticity, with two types of dimensions identified: the intrapersonal authenticity dimensions and the interpersonal authenticity dimension. So this was what we call the theoretical review. As you can see, there's nothing there on events or well-being events or online or virtual events. What the student did next was to explore the literature, what was known about existential authenticity in an event's context, dividing that in two parts, either in well-being events and in virtual events. This wasn't a very long section, was a page or two, because there wasn't much about the topic. And then the literature review chapter finishes with addressing the research gap, which is kind of a summary of the key ideas coming out of the literature, with a view to then explain what the gap in the literature review is. The literature review is a critical element of any good dissertation or thesis. And as far as this channel is concerned, I've developed a lot of content about doing literature reviews, and I've released several videos containing lots of tips and tools to help you write a better literature review. And this includes this video here, which I invite you to watch. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.